Hey, so I wanted to kind of address in this video a common thing with gladiators that I see in a lot of post-game threads or whatever it may be by either caster comments or Reddit comments, and I think this is like a really fair statement to say. Toshiro46 wrote, "I feel the main reason Glads aren't an elite team is how many unforced errors they make. So many used ultimates, questionable calls, aggro defense on Paris last fight, for example, that didn't necessarily cost them against a team like Toronto, but absolutely would against teams like Fusion and Shanghai Dragons, right? Uh, and I think this is like really strong statement, and I want to go over this because I think this is like not necessarily wrong, right? Like let's dig into it more, but there's a reasoning behind why we have quote unquote unforced errors. Let's take a look at the example actually this person brought up, right? Like I think it's a good example of what looks like a thrown fight or an unforced error, right?
It's got an extra syllable in there.
Yeah,
So
why
before
not?
the fight, Goose gets a pick. I'm pretty sure Birdring helped him out.
That's another
Essentially a random
devastating
pick, right?
pick as the Toronto Defiant try and enter. They really set themselves up in a horrible scenario here, Toronto, because
I think normally teams would kind of just, sit back, wait for the next fight. You will let the Zen walk in. It's probably like last fight on Paris, right? The Zen walks, it's 20 seconds from spawn. 50 seconds left. They have to posture a little bit. We can make last fight, basically. But our team instead decides to push.
did their time with a Rhine Diva composition, and when they finally swapped back over to double shield, they're never
Boom,
going to
Mirror
have an
gets
ult
another pick.
advantage because they were naturally behind the mirror composition of the Gladiators. So until they get all 6 ults up here with like 10
And then this is
seconds
where
left,
a big fight happens, right?
they just don't have a hope.
Very aggressive by the Gladiators, trying to take the fight outside. They use Gravitic Flux, they use the Transcendence. So they're trying to force this fight out. This might give Toronto an opportunity if they can get a pick off. Immortality Field goes down, and as the Transcendence is faded and the Dynamite's laid down, they're getting so many pickoffs. I'm really just questioning what was going on there with the...
Right here, it pretty much was a thrown fight. Mirror clutches here, basically, and gets two kills on the back end. He ults
Decision
with
making
BAP,
of the
and,
Gladiators
gets a kill,
to
and
play
then
that far forward. And now we see
gets
an
an
early
actual
supercharger
pick
being
with,
built up here by
backup on
Agilities.
himself.
Double Orisa, this is
and
something
then we
I
end up winning this fight because of stagger spawns, whatever.
And now, another...
But you got to be saying, like, hey, that was like an unnecessary risk. That was an unforced error, right? And I think, like, let's look back. Like, I think that's a fair criticism to make, especially in retrospect, especially from third person point of view, and like objectively, I think it is, a bad fight. But the reason it was a bad fight was, in my opinion, and like what we've been trying to show as coaches is like we want our team to find win conditions, whatever it is, and this was a win condition. You know how we talked about most teams on Paris. Second point, they get a pick on the Zen, they'll just wait. They'll wait for that Zen to spawn. Toronto backed up reasonably quickly. They exited reasonably well. No, we pushed really aggro right after. Mirror found a pick on Surefour, right?
They wasted their time with a Rhine Diva
Found a pick on
composition,
Surefour.
and when they
4v6,
finally swapped back over
Zen's
to double
Zen's
shield,
coming back. Zen's coming back fast.
They're never going to have an ult advantage because they were naturally behind the mirror composition of the Gladiators.
But right here,
so
like this is good. I think this is good. This is a 4v6, and we're pushing out. Normally you don't want to fight on their side. They have spawn advantage, whatever. But this is a 4v6. We have a way to win this fight for sure with the ults that we have.
They just don't have a hope.
OG's trying to farm Bongo.
Just trying to take the
We're
fight
going
outside.
first
They
with
use
this.
Gravitic Flux, they use the Transcendence. So they're trying to force this fight out. This might give Toronto an opportunity if they can get a pick
Doesn't
off.
end up well. Like, Goose is over here at the end of his trank. We tranked a little early. This Bongo gets immediately destroyed by Agilities in the air. He didn't put it around the corner enough, and Agilities was, above him to see it. But, like, this was a good idea, in my opinion, right? Like, I think we want to encourage our team to find win conditions wherever it may be. And I think this is, like, a really important thing that we've been trying to do to be a top team, actually. So I think this sentiment, at least from my perspective, is wrong. Is these aren't unforced errors. These are forced errors. We are forcing the issue onto the enemy team. And if we go aggro and, we essentially feed, like, feeding is good. Feeding is really good because that just means that you could have done something better. If we see an opportunity and we want to go in, we think that's the win condition, like, that's really good. But, not feeding means that you're not even trying to do something. So I'm okay with this play every single day of the week. I don't even think we've talked about this play as a team because I don't talk about, like, every single one of their mistakes. Like, this to me would be nitpicky. Like we could have gotten in and like we could have aggressed better, but like we could have swung out wider, for example, over here and like push more towards this side. We could have caught the Zen. We could have like coordinated our Bongo better with our pull. We could have had our bat balls ready on the side. Like there's a lot of things we could have done better in this fight, but I never want to discourage our team from like going in really aggro and making these plays. because these unforced errors are essentially like plays we want to make, plays we think we can win. These aren't errors because, we're, la-di-da-di-da going around. It's because we think these are a good way to win. And I think, like, I want to show this in stats in a bit. Actually, like, right now, right? Oh, it's loading. But basically, our team has, like, one of the highest win fight rates. Let's go to first team des. We have one of the first. Okay, so this is not where you want to be. This is where you want to be. You want to be Shanghai. You don't want to feed the first death of the fight, and you want to have a high win rate even when you do feed the first death of the fight. But like, this is not a bad place to be, in my opinion. Like, this just means we have a willingness to fight, even in down conditions, 5v6, whatever it may be. We have a willingness to like find the win condition, and we are finding it more often than other teams. Obviously, you don't want to be here, like in this middle section. You definitely don't want to be here where you have a really often first death and you never win when you're 5v6. You want to be here, but like the fact that we're here just means that we're finding that creativity. We're finding that way to win fights, and I think this is also how Overwatch is being like played more and more. Like really fast, really dynamic gameplay that isn't always perfect. I think especially with hero pools involved, but just in general, like. I remember Shock and Titans from Season 2, and it just always told, even if it was 5v6, they could win the fight, I think, we could even look at stats really quick, but they would always win the fight because they were always so creative, always so willing to fight that fight, if that makes sense. And so we never want to, like, discourage our team from feeding. Like, feeding is good because that just means, like, we could have done it better, in my opinion. And if we're completely not seeing any opportunities, that just means, like, we're not good players. We're not like seeing that. That's not the case. We're seeing opportunities. We're just missing them. And that just means, hey, we could have coordinated better. We could have swung out more. We could have done the fight better, right? Used our ults better. Talked about it earlier. Saw the opportunity faster. And we want to be in like this zone, right? Like these were the good teams of Season 2 for sure. And the reason Season 2 is like much more linear is because, Goats was much more straightforward. If you got a pick in this fight, usually that meant like, you were getting steamrolled. But I just wanted to talk about this comment because I think it's like really important that like from a caster perspective, I always see like casters say like, oh, that looked like a really unnecessary ult or something like that. And that's because when you're playing, like, you need to make those plays to try to win the fight. Even if it already is like a 4v3, you want to guarantee that fight. And you never want, as a coach at least, you never want your player to feel like, oh, like, are we really going to be talking about how we won that, or like how we won that fight with an extra ult? Or do we want to talk about, like how we took that fight and why that was fundamentally good, right? I think that's like really important. So unforced errors are good. Feeding is good because feeding just means you're learning. So if you're feeding in comp queue, that just means, you're getting better as long as you learn.